The Alaskan bush people, the Brown family, have been through a lot in the wild, but nothing as terrible as what Joshua Bam Bam Brown is going through now. An important family's second oldest son was given a punishment that will last a lifetime. A lot of Alaskan bush people fans were shocked when Joshua Brown found out the truth. As court documents show his fate, we look into how things went so badly for the Brown family member who lived in the woods, and how this sentence could mean ending the life he used to have for good. A family's wild history, Joshua Bam Bam Brown's world was shaped by the wilderness that was all around him, long before he had to fill out formal papers and go to court. Joshua Brown is the second son of Billy and Amy Brown. As a child, he learned survival skills that most kids will never need. Joshua learned how to build shelters and track animals across Alaska's rough terrain, while other kids worried about their homework and computer games. For decades, the Brown family lived in the Alaskan woods without electricity or running water. They made their own unique way of life by being far from modern society. The head of the Brown family, Billy Brown, valued freedom more than anything else. He wanted them to be free from society's rules, bills, and red tape, and they wanted to live their lives according to their own rules. This way of thinking formed Joshua from a very young age and gave him a strong sense of independence. When the Discovery Channel found the Browns in 2014, they planned to make a show about easy survival in the wilderness. Instead, they caught a more interesting scene, a family fighting against the worst parts of nature out of love and drive. Joshua became a fan favorite very fast. He was known for keeping his cool in tough situations and always being loyal to his family. While his brothers were more likely to act without thinking, Joshua was often the voice of reason, weighing their choices carefully before making a choice. People liked him because he was thoughtful, and they saw the right mix of Bush's wisdom and emotional intelligence in him. But living in the public eye caused problems that none of the Browns had planned for. Their private problems became fun for everyone to watch. Millions of people looked closely at their mistakes, whether they were small or big. In the middle of the exciting adventures that were meant to be filmed and the hard reality of living in the wilderness, the lines between the real life they lived and the life they showed fell apart. There's trouble coming. The Brown family had been getting money from Alaska's Permanent Fund Dividend Program for years. This program gives some of the state's oil money to residents who qualified. People who want to get these payments must live in Alaska all year and keep their permanent residency. No, Mom. As the Alaskan bush people became more well-known, people started to wonder where the family was while the movie was being made. Fans with sharp eyes saw that the show's storyline didn't make sense. Posts on social media showed family members living outside of Alaska during times when they said they were there. The Browns said they were nomadic bush people who moved their camps through the wilds of Alaska, but state agents began to piece together a different story. One that said the family spent a lot of time in the lower 48 states while still getting money from Alaska's oil. When officials looked at travel records, credit card statements, and witness statements, the probe got deeper. Documents showed that between 2009 and 2012, the time period being looked at, several members of the Brown family had spent more than 180 days a year outside of Alaska. This meant that they were not eligible for the income payments they were still getting. The fact that Joshua was involved became a big problem. As an adult, when he filled out his dividend applications, he directly confirmed that he had lived in Alaska his whole life. Each form had warnings about what would happen if you lied on it. With each signing, he legally promised to tell the truth about what he said. Investigators said that each application had information that just didn't make sense. At first, the family thought the claims were just mistakes. Billy Brown said they had always thought of Alaska as their home, no matter how short the trip is. Joshua agreed with his father's defense and said that because they were nomads, it was hard to use standard ideas of residency in their case. However, as more proof came in, the law started to change. The study gets stronger. Questions about paperwork that were just normal quickly turned into a full-on fraud probe. Alaskan state police looked through years of records, talked to witnesses, and carefully followed Brown's movements. Prosecutors were very worried about a pattern that was found during the probe. fine during the probe. Over the years, the family got more than $20,000 in dividends even though they didn't qualify. For Joshua Brown in particular, the attention was on the about $8,000 he had received over 4 years. This may not seem like a big amount of money compared to how much the family made from TV, but state officials saw the case as important for other reasons. Alaska's dividend program is based on trust, so people who live there are expected to lie about their status. Violations hurt the public's trust and take money away from people who should be getting it. The family's growing fame made things even more difficult. As more people watched the Alaskan bush people, video from the show could be used as proof, and resident claims made during the same time periods were directly at odds with episodes taken in Washington, Oregon, and other states. The documentary series that was supposed to celebrate their life in the woods made a paper trail that the police could follow. Joshua found himself in a very tough situation. Some of his younger brothers could say they were just doing what their parents told them to do, but he was an adult making his own legal statements. His signature was found on several applications that had what detectives now call false statements. As the probe went on, Joshua had fewer choices. Each week that went by, the proof against him got stronger. State officials came up with charges of lying and stealing, which were both very serious charges that could lead to jail time. The idea of criminal charges meant more than just legal trouble for a family that took pride in living a good life. Both on and off camera, it put at risk the core character they had built. A day in court. A day in court. The Juneau courthouse was very different from the freedom Joshua Brown had known all his life in the woods. Forest undergrowth was replaced with smooth marble floors. Instead of stars, fluorescent lights were used. On that important morning in 2016, Joshua walked in sporting what looked like his first formal suit. The collar was clearly too tight around his worn-out neck. As cameras clicked around them, Billy Brown walked next to him. Neither man spoke, which wasn't like them at all. The father and son had already been through bears, blizzards, and being alone. Now they had to deal with a different kind of wilderness, the Alaskan justice system. With a steady gaze that seemed to cut through the TV myths about the Browns, the judge led the case. As the prosecutors laid out their case, the courtroom went silent. They said that the defendants lied on their residency papers on purpose to get illegal state benefits. The prosecutor said that these suspects didn't just make a mistake. They consistently said they lived in Alaska, even though they actually lived somewhere else. Taking money meant for real northern people who are having a hard time with the high costs of living there. Joshua's lawyer asked for leniency by pointing out that his client had little formal schooling and relied on his father for guidance. Because Mr. Brown grew up alone, he learned to put family first above all else. When his father told him to sign those papers, he did so without fully understanding what the law meant. In a sneaky way, this defense plan put the blame on Billy, making things difficult between the father and son as they sat at the defendant's table. During cross-examination, Joshua stayed remarkably calm. When asked why he signed the forms even though he hadn't been to Alaska in a long time, he said, "My father taught me that home isn't just where you sleep, it's where your heart lives." Alaska has always been our real home, even when we had to live somewhere else. The answer was very moving, but it didn't say much about the formal requirements for residency. The judge didn't change his or her face. The turning point came when authorities showed Joshua's signature on several dividend applications along with photos that showed him in Washington State and California at times when he said he was in Alaska. The proof was so different from the story about the wilderness that it was impossible to explain. As the last piece of proof was being put in, Joshua closed his eyes for a moment. The weight of what was about to happen made his shoulders slump. The verdict would come soon after, and it would have effects that went far beyond the instant legal penalties. The line is broken. As the judge got ready to give his decision, the crowd went silent. After the last statements from both the prosecution and the defense, it was time to make a decision. For Joshua Bam Bam Brown, who was sitting next to his father Billy at the defendant's table, this was the end of a long investigation that had let the public see parts of the Brown family's life. As a first step, The court went over the charges, which included lying on an application for permanent fund dividends and lying without swearing in the second degree. The proof that was given was strong. There are travel records from long stays outside of Alaska, financial transactions in the lower 48 states, and statements from people who saw the Browns away from where they said they lived in Alaska when they said they were there. The court finds the evidence compelling and conclusive, the judge said in a loud voice that filled the quiet room. The accused knew they were giving false information on their applications about their residency status, which is why they got money that Alaskan law said they weren't entitled to. With those words, Joshua Brown was found guilty for sure. The reality TV star who made his name by being real in the woods was now found guilty of stealing from the state he said he lived in. People in the courtroom were aware of the irony, and several of them afterward told reporters that the situation made them feel very uncomfortable. After that, the judge moved on to sentence and carefully explained each part. The first punishment was 30 days in jail, which had to be spent in full, without the choice of being released early or being locked up at home. For someone who had spent his whole life roaming freely through Alaska's huge wilderness, the thought of being locked up inside concrete walls was more than just an annoyance. It meant being away from nature, which had shaped who he was since he was a kid. The judge said that the court knows that being locked up can be especially hard for people who are used to living an unusual life. But for the permanent fund dividend scheme, to be honest, people who break the rules on purpose need to face real consequences. The next thing that happened were fines. Additionally, Joshua would have to pay back the roughly $8,000 he got in illegal income payments, along with fines and court fees. What began as a legal matter for Joshua Brown from the Alaskan bush, people quickly turned into a problem for the whole family that put their famous toughness to the test in a way that the wilderness had never done. They built Browntown as a wilderness property and lived there. Right away, practical problems started to arise. Joshua's technical knowledge and ability to solve problems would have helped with projects that were left unfinished. The family's boat, which they used to get around and fish in the remote area, had engine problems that no one else could figure out as well as Joshua. Without his direction, even simple maintenance chores got harder. The generator that met their basic power needs kept breaking down, which made nights when temperatures dropped too low to be safe. He tried to fix things, but he didn't have his brother's organized way of dealing with mechanical issues. Noah's creative ideas didn't always work. Sometimes they were great, but they weren't always useful for the situation at hand. Both the physical and mental effects were very bad. For a long time, Joshua had been the one who kept his brothers together. Not as quick to act as Bear, more present than Matt, and more realistic than Noah. Without him, there was a hole that no one could quite fill. Family friends said that the tension in the family rose as the remaining brothers tried to figure out how to restructure their roles and relationships in light of the new situation. Bird took on more cooking duties, but it was hard to feed the hungry workers without Joshua's help with hunting. Gabe tried to be the leader, but he always felt bad about the choices his brother would have made with confidence. During this time, the family's usual unity, which was a big part of their public image, was clearly showing signs of strain. These events were especially hard for Amy Brown. She was already dealing with health problems that turned out to be serious, and now she knew that both her husband and son were being confined, which was something the family had planned their whole lives to avoid. But, as usual, she seemed cool and determined, focusing on keeping the family together during the crisis. But when the cameras weren't rolling, people close to the family noticed how thin she was getting and how worried she looked at Billy when they talked about Joshua's situation. The grandmother, who had lived through blizzards in Alaska, was now facing a different kind of storm that threatened the life she and Billy had built. The younger Brown children, especially Rain and Snowbird, had a hard time understanding what was going on. Since they grew up on camera, they didn't have much experience with being watched by the public, which made them turn negative. Rain shut down her social media accounts for a while after getting mean comments about her brother's court problems. Snowbird went deeper into nature and spent long days following animals without coming into touch with people. The family's carefully built wall between themselves and the rest of society had been broken. The youngest Browns had the hardest time getting used to their new life, where their family name had complicated meanings. Pressures on finances also got worse. Before the sentence, money had already been spent on legal fees. Because two important family members couldn't work or do anything that would have brought in money for the TV show, or their basic living, economic insecurity loomed. Alaskan bush people's production plan was going to be messed up, which could put at risk the platform that had helped them make money. Producers rushed to change the plots of the shows, sometimes shooting parts that had nothing to do with Joshua's absence, creating a story gap that watchers who were paying attention quickly picked up on. The family didn't expect to have to pay so much for legal fees and attorney fees for Billy and Joshua when they signed their TV deal. Executives at Discovery Channel had to find their way around in new areas. The network got to know the Browns through their honest life in the woods and strong family values. Criminal sentences, even short ones, made this story more difficult. With this setting in mind, would viewers still enjoy the family's adventures? Would donors still be happy with their relationship? No one answered these questions, so they hung in the air. The family's land, which used to be a source of safety, became another source of stress. While Joshua was in jail, property taxes were due, which made it hard to pay the bills without his help. The Browns had always shared resources and worked more like a family than as separate businesses. Because Joshua wasn't part of this economic ecosystem, there was an imbalance that put their whole security at risk. Bayer suggested that they sell wood from their land to cover their immediate costs, but that would take logging tools that Joshua usually took care of. Noah suggested making crafts to sell to tourists, but without Joshua's realistic advice, production stayed all over the place. Even the Browns' efforts to keep their privacy in check were harmed by Joshua's sentence. People in the area who used to respect the family's privacy now felt they could ask them annoying questions about their court problems. Some people brought cameras to the edges of Brown's land in the hopes of getting pictures of the upset family that they could sell. This invasion was mean to a family that had chosen to be alone to escape being watched so closely. Bam Bam had often been the family's representative to the outside world, making it easier for the family to deal with guests who were needed but not wanted. Without him, it became dangerously hard to tell the difference between public interest and private sadness. A media storm. The sentence given to Joshua Brown quickly spread through popular media. Tabloids and social media were full of loud headlines. Alaskan bush star gets jail time. A reality TV family has to deal with real problems. Joshua Brown from the wilds to the prison. It looked like each newspaper had a slightly different point of view, but they all stressed the same main irony. A family that was known for living freely was now being locked up. News shows put together segments with dramatic narration over clips from the show, putting pictures of Joshua building structures in the wilderness next to footage from the courthouse. Legal experts went on morning shows to argue about whether the sentence was fair or too harsh. People who used to live in Alaska talked about how important they thought the dividend program was and how serious they thought false claims were. Fans of Alaskan bush people had very different responses. A loud group of people were disappointed, feeling betrayed by findings that go against how the family is portrayed. What else might be added to their story if the Browns weren't always in Alaska like the show said they were? There are a lot of heated arguments in the comment parts about how real reality TV is. Others stood by the family and said that small mistakes in the papers shouldn't overshadow years of inspiring TV. These supporters said that the Browns' real outdoor skills and close family ties proved that these things were real, even if they broke the law. Discovery Channel put out a carefully worded statement recognizing the legal problem and reiterating its support for the show. Representatives from the network stressed that the events happened before they knew the family and were sure that the Browns would handle these issues in a responsible way. During this media storm, the Brown family kept almost completely quiet on public channels. There were no direct posts on social media about the situation, and there were no exclusive talks where they gave their opinion. This unusually quiet period was quickly filled by rumors and guesswork, which made an already complicated story even more difficult to follow. Goodbye for good. As Joshua Brown thought about the judge's ruling, those words, goodbye forever, hit him hard. Alaska's lasting ban on its dividend program meant more than just losing money. An Alaskan family's identity is strongly tied to their way of life, so being left out hit them somewhere deep. In 1982, the Permanent Fund Dividend Program was created to make sure that all Alaskans got a share of the state's natural resource wealth. Each qualified resident gets a payment every year from oil profits, which is a real way to show that they are connected to the land. These payments helped the Browns get through the tough years before they became famous on TV. They gave them the money they needed for winter supplies and repairs to their equipment. Being kicked out of this program for good means more than not getting any more payments. It was the Browns' official separation from the Alaskan society, which they had always seen as an important part of, even when they weren't there at the time. In essence, the sentence said that Joshua was no longer a real Alaskan in the eyes of the state. Family members said that this part of Joshua's sentence bothered him more than the jail time or fines in private talks after the sentence. As a child, he felt very connected to Alaska's strong sense of independence and wild history. The state was more than just where he lived. It was what he thought about. Having that link officially broken off, with the finality that comes with forever, was a loss that went beyond legal detail. Joshua spent hours writing in a journal while he was locked up, trying to make sense of this new world. There were thoughts on identity, connection, and what home means on the pages. If someone could never go back to the place that made them who they are, what would that mean for the relationship they built around that place? These questions kept him up at night much more often than any actual pain from being locked up. If Joshua gets in trouble with the law, what do you think? How would you have done things differently? Write your answer in the box below. Have a nice day, and we'll see you soon.